So I've set up my external program to accept the height and the width, my two configuration variables, and I've also had it accept a separator that I'm going to sandwich in between these two. And so the external program is going to take these three parameters and concatenate them together and return them into the description variable that I have defined up here. Okay, so let's see how we do that. So I've got a instance of Visual Studio here, and I'm just going to start a new project. Now I'm not sure what folks' flavor of choice is as far as VB or C#. I'm going to go ahead and do this in VB. Customer hours. It's called Customer Hours EP is what I'm going to call this project. And Visual Studio will bring up the sort of the default class. And so I'm going to call this class sample EP. And you may remember these things that I'm calling it are a little bit familiar because this is what I was going to register this external program as. Okay, now I mentioned that there's an interface that we have to implement in order for this to work. And the name of the interface is iExternalProgram. And you'll notice that VB doesn't know, it doesn't know what that is right now. So what I need to do is I need to add some references to my project so that it knows, what is this interface. So if I go into project, let me just add a reference here. And there's three files that I'm going to reference. I need to reference the C3 common interfaces, the C3 EP interfaces, and the configurator EP interfaces 5. And all of these interfaces are installed when you install standalone, as well as if you're doing this through ByDesign channel sales. So go up to the C drive here. Sorry, I should slow down a little bit so you guys can see where this is. On the C drive under Program Files, by default with a standalone install, these are installed under the ByDesign folder, and then under Common, Configurator, Server. And you'll see that there's C3 Common Interfaces, DLL, C3 EP Interfaces, and Configurator EP Interfaces 5. Okay, so when I add this, add these references to my project, then I have the references. I just need to add some import statements here. So I just add this namespace, which will have this this external program interface on it. So all I did was add a reference to the configurator interface files, and I created a class that implements iExternalProgram. And when I do that in VB, if you put your cursor on this line of header, it'll add all of the different functions that we need to implement. And these are the functions that the configurator is going to call when it hits your rule. The first one that it's actually going to call is going to be initialize. So the first time you hit one of your external program rules that is referencing this external program, it'll run the initialize. And then that first time and each subsequent time, it'll call execute. And so if you have any sort of data or things that you want to keep around, you can keep them as module level variables in here, and they'll be available to you for each call within the context of one configuration. Terminate is going to be called when the engine completes and configuration is done. So if you have any cleanup that you need to do, it can be done there. I'm not going to get into reset too much, but just to let you know that has to do with if the engine, if you start executing the engine at different locations, it'll do a reset. If you need more information about this, we can certainly help you out with that. But really the key ones are initialize, execute, and terminate. Okay, so what I want to do in my execute, so every time the rule executes, I want to take my three parameters, and let me jump back there to remind you what we have. This is the rule that's going to execute, and I'm going to get three parameters, one called height, one called width, and one called separator. And so I want to take those three parameters and I want to concatenate those together. And you'll see conveniently enough, that as parameters to my execute method, it includes a parameters object, and it also includes a config session object. And so pretty much anything I think that you're going to need that's part of your configuration is going to be available here. So let's first take a look at the parameters object. You can see that it has a count. It's actually a collection, so it has a number. So in our case, this count would be 3, but we're going to go specifically at a couple of items. So if I do parameters.item of height dot value, this is going to give me whatever the value of o-height is when this rule executes. So let me just dim up a couple variables here. I'll call it results. And so we'll just start concatenating these things together. Width. All right. Oops, I need a value here. Okay. So I'll put this all in one line. Hopefully everybody can read this okay, and I'm not going too fast. Okay, so basically I've just taken the values of my parameters in the order that I want them, and put them into a resulting variable. Now there's only there's two more things that I need to do. I need to return the value, and I need to let configurator know that everything went well. So to return the value on the parameters object, I have a method called result. And so once I know what I want to return, I call this method, and I pass in the result that I want to return, as well as a data type. So if I know that my result was alpha or boolean or whatever it happens to be, I can pass that value along with it. So that tells the configurator that I was able to find a result. And then I just need to tell it that everything went good, so I just return true. And you'll notice that this function, that the execute is a function, and it returns type, way over here, it returns a type of boolean. So it's going to expect me to return either true or false. If something went bad and I wanted to return false, it's actually going to raise an error and stop the configuration. Similarly, if I raise an error or throw an exception from within here, or an exception happens, if I mistype width and I type width x, something like that, that's going to cause an exception to throw, and it's going to stop the configuration. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and compile this. My build succeeded, but one thing that this is not going to work just as is. Now, you may have recalled that I said this is actually a COM interface, and by default, .NET does not do COM interfaces. So what I need to do to make that happen is add an attribute on this class. It's basically COM visible of true. Okay. And I need to import the namespace for that. System.runtime.interop services. And as a good practice in developing COM objects from .NET, you should also provide a GUID for it, so that each time that you run it, it won't create a new, every time you compile it won't create a new GUID. So I'll just create a GUID here real quick. Dump it in there, and I got to take the curly braces off. Okay. So far, so good. The build still succeeds, but there's one other thing that we need to do to make this work, or at least make it easier. You can do this without setting this, but it's a good practice to go into your properties of your project and turn on register for COM interop. And all this will do is register your class to be used as a COM object when you build it. And you'll notice that my root namespace is customer hours EP, and my class is called sample EP.